In Laboratory Reddit, today's story is...
In the middle of my wedding reception, my mother-in-law grabbed the microphone and announced, "As a special gift, I've invited the bride's father," without knowing that I had cut contact with him for years of abuse and manipulation. Her expression when my husband took the microphone was priceless. This week I got married to Alex. We're now on our honeymoon, but instead of enjoying it, we're dealing with a real headache because my mother-in-law is furious and won't stop calling us. So here I am on Reddit looking for advice. To better understand the situation, I should start by talking about my father and the kind of person he is. He simply was never really present in my life. He was the classic man who made promises he never kept and who always prioritized his selfish desires above his family. Throughout my life, he was more of a burden than a father. He had multiple affairs, betraying my mother in the worst possible way, not just with strangers, but with her closest friends. He broke her heart. He humiliated her and left her alone, struggling to maintain order, while he continued living recklessly. Besides being unfaithful, he was terrible with money. He never planned for the future, never saved anything for emergencies or for me. Instead, he squandered what little he had on gambling, throwing away any possibility of stability. Once he even went to the extreme of stealing from my mother the money she had saved with so much effort. And he gambled it all away without thinking twice. To make matters worse, he also had violent tendencies. On one occasion, he beat someone so brutally in a bar that he ended up in prison for a while. Due to all this, I never felt any kind of bond with him. There was no love, no trust, nothing that should exist between a father and a daughter. The only true parental figure I had was my mother. She was everything to me. My role model, my best friend, the only person I knew I could always count on. She worked tirelessly to make sure I had a good life, picking up the pieces every time my father caused a disaster. I loved her more than anything in this world. She was the only person who really mattered to me. But life can be cruel. Just when I was about to graduate from high school, my mother passed away. I lost the only parental figure I had truly known. The only person who had made me feel safe and loved. And what made it even harder was that I never had the chance to share with her one of the most important moments of my life. I had been accepted into my dream university, something she had always encouraged me to fight for. But she wasn't there when I could tell her I could never see the pride in her eyes. That thought still haunts me to this day. Everything got worse after her death, as I struggled with the pain of her loss. My father didn't seem to care at all. He never mourned her, never shed a tear, never showed the slightest sign of having lost someone important. All he cared about was the money he was going to inherit. He assumed he would inherit everything she owned, as if he were entitled to it, despite all the ways he had hurt her. But my mother, being the intelligent and strong woman she was, had made sure that wouldn't happen. She had legally left me her car and all the money in her bank account. That decision saved me, but it enraged my father. He received the life insurance payment, which was already a considerable sum, but that wasn't enough. He believed he deserved more. He really thought I would just hand over everything my mother had left me, as if it were his right to take it. But I wasn't that naive. I knew my father perfectly well and knew what he would do if I gave him a single cent. He would gamble it all away, just as he had done with every euro that had passed through his hands. So I refused. I stood firm and kept what my mother had left me, knowing that's what she would have wanted. By the time I moved to university, my father had already moved on with his life. He had a new girlfriend, much younger, someone who probably had no idea what kind of man he really was. And once I was settled, I realized I had no reason to keep him in my life. I practically cut off all communication with him because every time he called me, it was never to ask how I was doing or to offer me any kind of support. No. The only reason he ever contacted me was to ask for money. Can you imagine that? An adult man, a father, constantly asking his own daughter for money? It was pathetic. It made me realize even more that I had made the right decision to keep my distance. I had lost my mother, the only true parental figure I had had. And although I was completely alone, I preferred to fight on my own rather than let him drag me down with him. After cutting ties with my father, I knew I had to become completely independent. I started working at a food place while studying at university, earning my own money so I wouldn't have to depend on anyone. I worked long hours, sometimes juggling shifts between classes, but I didn't care. Every euro I saved made me feel stronger, as if I were taking control of my own life, something my father had never done for himself. I also made myself a promise. I would never contact him again. But of course, my father wasn't the type to simply disappear. Over the years, he kept trying to come back into my life, especially after I graduated and got a stable job. It was clear he didn't want to reconnect with me because he missed me. He just saw me as a source of money now that I had stable income. Although I had blocked his number and ignored his attempts to communicate, I made a small mistake. I had put the details of my job on my LinkedIn profile. That was all he needed. One day, after finishing my workday, I left my office building only to find him waiting for me at the door. He was drunk, with a wrinkled shirt, messy hair, and reeking of alcohol. As soon as he saw me, he staggered forward and began to beg, wanting me to lend him thousands of euros as if I had that money to spare. As if I owed him something. As if he had ever been there for me, supported me, or done anything to deserve my help. He needed that money to pay off his gambling debts. I refused without hesitation and told him that his debts were not my problem. But he wouldn't take no for an answer. His pleas turned into threats. He said that if I didn't give him the money, he would go talk to my boss to ask for it. He was willing to embarrass me at my workplace, willing to humiliate himself if it meant getting what he wanted. But I didn't let myself be intimidated. I looked him in the eyes and firmly told him that if he took a single step into my office, I would make sure my boss called the police. I didn't want him near me, and I certainly didn't want him to identify himself as my father. Because in my eyes, he wasn't. He had never been a father to me, never helped my mother raise me, never acted like a real father. And I didn't want anything to do with him. I made it very clear to him before walking away. My father wouldn't stop shouting. He was drunk, loud, and completely shameless. People passing by started to look, and I felt humiliated. No matter how firmly I refused to give him money, he kept shouting, acting as if I were the irrational one. It was exhausting. And deep down, I knew he wouldn't leave me alone unless I gave him something. So just to get rid of him, I gave him a few hundred euros. It wasn't much, but it was enough for him to finally leave. After that incident, I didn't want to take any more risks. I immediately spoke with security at my building and made sure they knew they should never let him in if he showed up again. I also talked to my boss and explained the situation. Fortunately, he was incredibly understanding and assured me that if my father ever tried to cause problems at work, they would handle it. That gave me some peace of mind, but I knew that as long as my father was around, he would never stop trying to slip back into my life, and I was right. When I met Alex, my father saw it as another opportunity to take advantage of me. I had been very careful to keep my relationship private, never posting about it on social media because I knew my father. I knew what kind of person he was, how he always looked for ways to manipulate me and make me feel guilty. But somehow, he found out about Alex's existence. I don't know how he managed it, maybe through distant relatives, maybe through people who knew me, but once he had that information, he located Alex and started sending him messages out of nowhere. He told him that he should be careful about marrying a gold digger like me. He painted me as some kind of scammer, saying I was like my mother, someone who used people and discarded them afterward. To make matters worse, he even talked about my mother's money, twisting the story to make himself out to be the victim. He told Alex that I had stolen the money after my mother passed away, that I had run off with it without giving him his rightful share. He tried to make it seem like I was the greedy and selfish one, all because I had refused to let him take what wasn't even his to begin with. Reading those messages made my blood boil. I felt extremely embarrassed that my own father had contacted my partner and made up such lies just to try to sabotage my relationship. It also made me realize that no matter how much time passed, no matter how much I distanced myself from him, he would always find a way to try to bring me down. Fortunately, Alex knows me well enough to know that it was all lies. He blocked my father, and I thought that after that incident he could never hurt us again. Alex and I had been planning our wedding for weeks, and everything was falling into place just as we wanted. We had decided to have a destination wedding, something intimate, quiet, and meaningful to us. Neither of us wanted a big, extravagant event, and, luckily, most of our family members supported that decision. Most, but not all. Alex's mother, my mother-in-law, wasn't happy. She had made her feelings about our small wedding very clear from the beginning. In her mind, a wedding wasn't just about the couple. It was about her being able to show off to all her friends and neighbors. She believed we should have allowed her to invite all her acquaintances, even people Alex and I had never seen. She wanted our wedding to be more about appearances, about impressing others. When Alex and I stood firm and said no, she was furious. But instead of being upset with both of us, she decided that I was the problem. In her eyes, I was the mastermind behind it all. She believed I had manipulated her son into wanting a small wedding, that I was the reason she wasn't getting the big show she had always dreamed of. The truth is that my mother-in-law has never liked me. From the moment Alex and I got serious, she has resented me for one reason or another. Maybe it's because I've never sought her approval, never bent over backwards to please her as she expected. And it's probably bothered her even more, because she hasn't had control over me. She constantly looks for ways to belittle me at every opportunity she gets. It's as if she's always looking for something to criticize me about, no matter how insignificant. If I cook something for her and my father-in-law, she criticizes even the smallest detail. She acts as if I had personally offended her with my cooking, comparing it to hers, and dramatically sighing about how I will never match her culinary skills. And, of course, she never fails to remind everyone that her son is going to suffer after marrying me, as if my ability to cook somehow defined my entire worth as a wife. But her issues with me aren't limited to cooking. The biggest problem, according to her, is that my husband and I don't want children, at least not yet. In her mind, this is completely my fault. She's convinced that I'm the one brainwashing her poor son into not wanting to have children yet. She has told me several times that I owe her a grandchild soon, as if having a child were some kind of debt that I'm supposed to pay her. She has even gone to the extreme of telling me that if my first child isn't a boy, she will be very disappointed in me. The fact that she thinks she has the right to decide about my body and my marriage is more than frustrating. The only consolation in all of this is my husband. He has always been on my side and defended me. Every time his mother tries to belittle me or make me feel small, he stops her. He makes it clear that our decisions are ours and that she has no say. But despite that, she never stops. No matter how many times he defends me, she continues to take advantage of every opportunity to attack me, as if she were waiting for the day I finally break down. Anyway, before the wedding, I had made it very clear that from my side of the family, only some of my close cousins and relatives were invited. My father, however, was not on that list. I didn't want him there, and I made sure everyone knew it, including my mother-in-law and father-in-law. They knew my history with him. They knew what kind of person he was. They knew exactly why I didn't want to have anything to do with him. So imagine my surprise when, during the reception, after our beautiful wedding ceremony, when everything was going perfectly, I suddenly saw him entering our party. I froze. My whole body went cold as soon as I laid eyes on him. My husband and I looked at each other at the same time, both trying to process what was happening. My father shouldn't have been there. How did he even know where to come? Who had told him? And then, to our complete astonishment, my mother-in-law got up from her seat and walked straight toward him. I watched in horror as she shook his hand as if they were old friends. They stood there smiling and chatting as if this were some kind of reunion, instead of one of the most important days of my life being ruined. It was then that I realized she had planned it. She was the one who had invited him. Before my husband and I could even react, before I could approach and demand an explanation, my mother-in-law grabbed the microphone. With the most smug smile on her face, she announced to the entire wedding, "As a special wedding gift, I have invited the bride's father to be here with us today." I felt my stomach drop to my feet. My hands closed into fists as I stood there, too stunned to move. But she wasn't finished yet. She turned to me with an expression full of fake compassion and said, I know you didn't want your father at your wedding, but I decided to invite him anyway, because I really hoped that no matter how terrible the history between you two, you would find it in your heart to forgive your father. He's your only living parent, and you shouldn't push him away." I felt pure rage boiling inside me as I looked at my mother-in-law. How dare she? She had no idea what this man had put me and my mother through. The betrayals, the heartbreak, the trauma that still lingered. She had no right to go behind my back and invite my father to my wedding, the happiest day of my life, when all I wanted was a joyful and stress-free night. I looked at my husband and could see the anger in his eyes. He was as furious as I was. With a bright smile of self-satisfaction, my mother-in-law handed the microphone to my father. My heart stopped. My father took the microphone, thanked my mother-in-law, and began to speak. He didn't start with an apology. He didn't acknowledge the years of pain or the damage he had caused. Instead, he launched into a self-pitying diatribe about how difficult it had been for him after my mother died. He talked about how hard it was to be a single father, as if he really had been one. He spoke as if he had actually raised me, cared for me, or done anything for me after Mom passed away. Then he casually admitted that he had made some mistakes in life, but that he had matured over the years and regretted how he had treated me. He continued his speech, acting like a poor, misunderstood father. He told everyone that I had held onto my resentment for too long and that I needed to let things go so we could start over, that I was being stubborn by not forgiving him. And then came the final blow. He said that he had done his best to be a good father, that I should be grateful for all the sacrifices he had made for me, that instead of pushing him away, I should have been grateful and forgiven everything he had done. I could barely hear anything else after that. My blood was pounding in my ears. The audacity, the absolute nerve of this man to stand there on my wedding day in front of all my loved ones and rewrite history as if I owed him something. I looked at my mother-in-law, who was watching with a smug and satisfied look on her face as if she had just done something wonderful. It was then that I knew. This wasn't just about my father. She had done this to humiliate me, to put me in my place. My father continued announcing that the only thing he hoped for was that on my wedding day I would leave all my hatred behind and become a better person by forgiving him and making him part of our lives from now on, as he would love to get to know me and my husband better. At that moment, before I could even process what was happening, my husband stood up from his seat without hesitation. He walked straight to my father, snatched the microphone from his hands, and turned to face him with pure fury in his eyes. I watched as Alex leaned in and spoke to my father. I couldn't hear what he said, but whatever it was, it made my father's face change from smug confidence to absolute bewilderment. And then, loud enough for everyone to hear, my husband announced that my father had to leave our wedding immediately. The room fell silent. My father stood there, clearly shocked. It was as if he had genuinely expected my husband and me to simply embrace him, to welcome him with open arms after all these years. He had no idea how wrong he was. But, of course, he didn't leave immediately. He tried to argue, saying something about how he deserved to be present at his daughter's wedding. My mother-in-law quickly intervened as well, rushing to his side in support. She tried to stop my husband, insisting that throwing my father out was cruel and unnecessary. However, Alex didn't give in. He looked her in the eyes and made it very clear that if my father didn't leave on his own, he would call security. There was a tense moment of tug-of-war, with my father still trying to stand his ground and my mother-in-law desperately defending her grand gesture. But my husband didn't budge. Finally, after realizing he wasn't going to win, my father gave up. He huffed, muttered something under his breath, and left. I stood there trembling with silent anger, watching him go. At last, I wanted to scream, cry, just collapse right there. But I refused to give them that satisfaction. I wasn't going to let either of them ruin my day anymore. So instead, I took a deep breath, got up from my seat, and headed towards my mother-in-law. My voice was firm, but the anger in it was impossible to ignore. "You need to leave too." Her eyes widened. "You've done enough to try to ruin our wedding. It's a shame to have you as a mother-in-law, and I never want to see your face again." The color drained from her face before she quickly turned red with anger. She looked around as if expecting someone to come to her rescue, to back her up. Her eyes went to my father-in-law and then to my husband. Neither of them said a word. Realizing she had no support, she insulted me and then stormed out of the reception with an angry huff. After she left, there was a moment of stunned silence before, one by one, the guests approached me, telling me I had done the right thing, that what my mother-in-law had done to us was more than disrespectful, that she had no right to interfere in such a personal and painful part of my life by inviting someone I didn't want there. Now that the wedding is over, my mother-in-law is losing her mind. She has been bombarding our phones with message after message, furious because we humiliated her by throwing her out unceremoniously. She keeps repeating how we disrespected her in front of everyone, and how she was only trying to do the right thing by bringing my father to the wedding. But the funniest thing is that she's demanding we make a public apology. That's right, she wants us to apologize. It's almost laughable. My husband and I haven't even responded to her yet, honestly. We don't know what to say because no reasoning will make her see that she was the one who was wrong. So, am I the bad guy? Update 1. When I first posted, I was still processing everything and feeling overwhelmed, but reading your responses has made me feel so understood and validated. I spent years dealing with my father's toxicity and my mother-in-law's passive-aggressive behavior, and for a long time I felt that maybe I was overreacting or being too harsh. But after hearing from so many of you, I now know I've been right all along. My mother-in-law is still on her crusade to present herself as the victim in all of this. She has been calling every relative, friend, and even some of our wedding guests to tell them how horribly we treated her, when all she wanted was to do something good for me and hopefully help me get closure with my father. She keeps saying that we embarrassed her in front of everyone on the most important day of her son's life, and that all she was trying to do was help repair a broken family. Fortunately, most people aren't buying her sob story, and have told her it wasn't her place to interfere in my life. As for my father, I contacted him just enough to inform him in unequivocal terms that if he ever tries to show up in my life again, whether at my workplace, my home, or through my husband, I will take legal action against him. I made it clear that with his criminal record, it wouldn't be difficult for me to get a restraining order. I know how it works, and I refuse to let him think he can just come back into my life whenever he wants, expecting money or attention. I don't want him back in my life ever. The only person who has really been my support through all of this is my husband, Alex. He has been amazing, firm, unwavering, and completely on my side. He told me that his mother's actions were unforgivable and that we don't owe her anything. He now flatly refuses to deal with his mother until she apologizes. And honestly, even if she apologizes, I don't know if I can ever see her the same way again. Update 2. Today my mother-in-law sent me another long message. This time, she insisted that I'm being dramatic for cutting off the relationship with her over what she calls a good deed. She claimed she was only trying to help me get closure with my estranged father, and that I'm being a crazy, overly emotional person for reacting the way I did. At this point, I don't even have the energy to stay angry. I simply feel exhausted. So my husband and I talked, and we've both blocked her. We don't want any more fake apologies. We don't want any more justifications for her actions. We don't want anything from her. We just want her out of our lives. The good thing is that my husband spoke with my father-in-law about all this, and fortunately, he understands our decision. He told us that, although he wishes things hadn't come to this point, he respects our choice to cut ties with my mother-in-law and won't interfere. Honestly, that's all we needed. Now we're going to try to focus on us, on our new life together, and on surrounding ourselves with the right people. Those who truly respect and love us. Update 3. You are all right. My mother-in-law tried to show up at our house unannounced. Honestly, I knew she wasn't going to let this go so easily, so I followed your advice and had already installed cameras around the house. And let me tell you, it was the best decision. When she showed up, I didn't even bother opening the door. I just sat and watched through the camera as she completely lost her composure. She screamed, yelled, and pounded on the door, trying to force me to confront her. It was frankly hilarious, like watching a small child throwing a tantrum in the middle of a store because they didn't get the toy they wanted. Except in this case, the small child was an adult woman behaving like a complete lunatic. I contacted my husband and father-in-law to let them know what was happening. My father-in-law immediately called my mother-in-law and told her to go home. I could hear them arguing through the camera with her screaming like a crazy person. However, she finally left. Probably because my father-in-law must have warned her that if she continued, he wouldn't hesitate to call the police. Now my husband plans to visit his parents after work one last time to make it completely clear to them that they are not allowed to come to our house ever again. No calls, no surprise visits, nothing. Let's hope my mother-in-law finally gets the message this time, although honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if she tries something even more ridiculous next.